is Roosevelt Wicks, and I want to thank you for joining me, the Library Foundation, and the Austin Public Library for the Mayor's Book Club Read Local program. Traditionally, we recommend 1 or 2 books for Austinite to read as part of the Mayor's Book Club. This year, I'm thrilled to expand the Mayor's Book Club to include over 50 books published by Austin authors in 2020 that represent a wide range of forms and genre and include books for adults, children, and teens. This expansion of the program gives us the opportunity to promote Austin's rich literary history, the scenes, and particularly many Austin authors whose titles might not have gotten published or gotten the attention that they deserve due to the COVID-19 pandemic. I encourage you to visit the Library Foundation's website at austinlibrary.org for the entire list of titles and a complete schedule of virtual programs for the whole family that include author reading, book crush reading workshops, a poetry workshop series, and a picture book Palooza. Thank you again. Please enjoy the program and read local. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tate, and I would like to talk about my forthcoming book, William Still and His Freedom Stories, Father of the Underground Railroad. Now, the story of Harriet Tubman has always been one of my favorites. You know, I've always been in love with this strong African-American woman who helped hundreds of enslaved people escape north on the Underground Railroad system. So I really became intrigued when I came across the name of William Still. So I became inspired to write the story of William Still when my mom sent me a copy of the Biographical Dictionary of African Americans. My mom's always sending me stuff, and I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do with this book. Well, one day I started flipping through it, and I was looking at some of the names inside. One day I came across the name of William Still. Born 1821, leader of the Underground Railroad. Wow, I've always been intrigued, with stories about the Underground Railroad. And of course, like I said, I've always loved the story of Harriet Tubman. As I read on, I came to learn that William Still actually worked with Harriet Tubman. There were nights that Harriet Tubman passed through his line of the Underground Railroad. And I thought, Father of the Underground Railroad, how come I'm not familiar with this story? I did a little bit of research and I discovered so many things about William Still that I thought was important to share with young readers, and I decided his story is long overdue to be told. Have you ever heard the word abolitionist? You see, I knew what an abolitionist was. An abolitionist was one who worked hard for the abolition of slavery. They truly believed that slavery was wrong. So they printed flyers and pamphlets, and they distributed them all over the North and the South, trying to change minds about the institution of slavery. The only thing is in my mind, and I thought that an abolitionist was a white person who helped an African-American escape from slavery. So when I discovered that William Still was a Black abolitionist, I wondered how come I had never heard of a Black abolitionist. And so that became one of the other reasons why I wanted to tell his story. So I would love to read a short passage from my book. The story begins at a time when the United States was split in two. In the North, Black people were free. In the South, they were enslaved by whites. Slavery was a nightmare. Back-breaking work under the scorching sun, threats of lashing, or worse, there was no pay. Children were separated from their mamas and papas, brothers and sisters, sold away at auction, never to be seen again. Sometime during the 1700s, Levin and Sidney Steele were held captive on a Maryland farm, forced to work. Their 4 children were too. The family yearned to live free. I will die before I submit to the yoke, Levin told the man who enslaved him. The two came to an agreement. Levin was allowed to work over hours, actually earning a small income. With the money he earned, he purchased his freedom. But freedom wasn't always fair, especially to Black people. Could a free Black man remain in the South? Levin must have wondered. Might he be enslaved again? No chancing that. Levin bid his family goodbye with a plan to return to rescue them later. In a blink, he bolted north. Sydney wasn't so fortunate. There was no opportunity for her or the children to purchase their freedom. They remained behind, still enslaved, a separation Sydney could not endure. Torn and tormented, she whispered a parting prayer for her two boys, who were big and strong enough to fend for themselves. Then she escaped with her two girls. Sydney reunited with her husband in the Pine Woods near Washington Township, New Jersey. Now they were together, free as the wind. They changed their name from Steele to Still to throw slave catchers off. Their new life was good, but living ached like an open sore. Levin and Sydney longed for the two sons they had left behind. Over the years, the family grew. Now there were 15 children, 15 mouths to feed. Oh, how they struggled. Money was tight, food was scarce, shoes, if any, were hand-me-down. In 1821, the youngest child was born. Sunlit eyes, mahogany skin. They named him William. He grew quick as a weed. 8 years later, a neighbor was attacked late one night. The man had once been enslaved in the South. He had escaped and found peace in the pines. Slave catchers, they tracked the man down. They rushed at him, cuffed his arms, beat him badly. Thankfully, the man escaped, but he needed help, and soon the greedy men were still on the prowl. The neighbors, they called on William. The young boy knew every nook and cranny of the woods. William led the man to safety, some 20 miles away. The experience defined the rest of his life. So even from a young age, William still loved helping people. But I bet that he never imagined that he would go on to help hundreds of people escape from slavery. Now, if you're not quite sure exactly what the Underground Railroad is or was, it was a secret, a top secret network of homes and churches and organizations that helped enslaved people. Once they arrived in Philadelphia, they would hide them, and then they would point them in the direction on where they could hide next. And so finally, those people could work their way out of the South and into the North, maybe even as far as Canada, where they might be safe. As these freedom seekers arrived in Philadelphia, William would seek them out. He would help them financially. He would help them if they had a need for, say, shoes or clothes. William would help them. He became a top conductor on Philadelphia's Underground Railroad system. But not only that, as people passed through his home, he would record their names, their ages, whether it was a boy or a girl, a man or a woman. He questioned where they were trying to go, where had they come from, who had they escaped from. His goal was to help these families that were torn apart by slavery eventually be able to reunite with their families. But not only that, William recorded their stories. Now, when I first wrote this book, I was already familiar with the story of Henry Box Brown, an enslaved man who had escaped from the South by shipping himself north in a box. What I didn't know is that that box was actually shipped to William Still's office. So William Still was right there when that box was opened. I was already familiar with the story of Harriet Tubman, of course, but what I didn't know was that William Still actually helped Harriet Tubman on many occasions. And the reason why we know these stories is because William Still documented them. And that's the point of this entire book, the importance of preserving stories. As far as drawing my pictures, today I work 100% digitally. So I sit down at my Cintiq, which I describe as it looks like a great big iPad that I draw on. And I use a program called Adobe Photoshop or Manga Studio that simulates any kind of natural media that you can imagine. As you know, I am an author and an illustrator, and oftentimes folks will ask me, Don, what do you like better, writing or illustrating? And I love the entire bookmaking process. I love writing just as much as I love illustrating. When I start a new book, I write out the entire story, and then I revise that story 10, 20, 30, 40 times. And then I get out my pencils and I start drawing. And as I start to draw, I realize that there are some words in that manuscript that don't need to be included. So I go in and I revise my manuscript. And then I discover that by revising the manuscript, the illustrations have been affected. So then I go back and I revise the illustrations, and then I go back and I revise the words, and I go back and forth, back and forth. I know, drive my own self crazy, but that's my process. I do a lot of research when I am writing and illustrating a book. For the William Still story, I used the actual book that he published called The Underground Railroad. In that book were the stories that he recorded. In his Journal C were the details of the people who passed through his line of the Underground Railroad. So I studied all of those records, and I used those records to make my story of William Still's life all the more real. One of the coolest research opportunities that I had while telling this story was when I traveled to Philadelphia, and I went to the Philadelphia Historical Society, and I was actually able to hold some of William Still's artifacts in my hands. Probably the most cool artifact that I found was this page here, which is an actual page from William Still's journal. And on this page, he archived the night that Harriet Tubman passed through his line of the Underground Railroad. Right here it says it was December 29th of 1854. And when I saw this document and I held it in my hands, I knew that it would have to become the image that I would use on my end papers. So what are the takeaways from my book, William Still and His Freedom Stories? What do I want you to most remember about this book? Well, that would be the importance of preserving stories. I believe that stories are so important. Stories are how we learn about each other. Stories are how we learn about the world. I think that it is so important that young readers interview relatives, interview the grandparents, learn who your family descendants are, and to document the details about your family and to document these stories. And so I want to read a small passage of the very last page of the book. William Still's records and the stories he preserved reunited families torn apart by slavery, because that's what stories can do. Protest injustice, soothe, teach, inspire, connect. Stories save lives. William's stories needed to be told so slavery's nightmare will never happen again. So young readers, again, the name of my book is William Still and His Freedom Stories, Father of the Underground Railroad. Be sure to get a copy of the book at the Austin Public Library or any other place where books are sold. You can get them at Book People here in Austin, Texas. You can get a copy at Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Or most likely, you can probably even check one out at your school library. So I hope that you will check out the book or buy a book. And I hope that you will enjoy the story. Thank you so much.